Haunted dolls. Is it cursed? Is it possessed? Why does it call your name at night? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and get ready for 3 of these stories. Demon Doll. Just about a year ago, I had a glass doll. She had blonde curly hair, light brown eyes, and she wore this white dress. Usually during the night, she would look really creepy. I don't know how to explain it, but she just had this unusual look to her. I just ignored it, and didn't really care about it. But after I came back from a vacation to Texas, she was even more creepy looking. And there was a weird, unusual presence near the cabinet. I also began to hear noises, and sometimes I heard my name being called at night. It creeped me out a little, but I still just ignored it. The doll was in a tiny little white glass cabinet I had in my room. She always had this small, shy smile. A couple of weeks went by, and I had to move, so I had a lot of packing to do. One night, when I was in my bedroom packing stuff up, I had my door locked and closed. I was facing behind the cabinet, and I just started feeling a weird presence there. I turned, and the doll was smiling, like a big smile, bigger than her usual one, and her eyes were pitch black. I stood and walked out of my room. I stayed out of my room for the rest of the night. The next morning, I packed her up, and she's still in the box today, up top in my closet. I have nightmares about her sometimes, but I just ignore them and don't think much of them. I don't know if I'm just seeing things that night, but it creeped me out, and I never want to unpack her again. What do you think of it? What should I do with the doll? Sell it, or keep it in a box or something else? The Blonde Doll. So I've had many experiences, but I've never actually seen a ghost. I do believe in them though, but I'm also afraid that one day I may see one. This experience of mine happened when I was 5 years old, and my sister was 9 years old, and we were living in our previous house. I may have been young, but I remember this experience. One day, my parents went to a garage sale and bought 2 porcelain dolls. One blonde one, in a green dress, and a brunette one in a pink dress. My parents bought these dolls for me and my sister. I owned the brunette, and my sister owned the blonde doll. I love my doll so much, I put it away so it wouldn't get damaged. My doll was perfectly harmless. But the other doll was not innocent at all. My sister put her doll on display in her room. When it was time for us to go to bed, my sister turned her lights off and went to sleep. I was also asleep until I woke up in the middle of the night to her yelling out for my mother. My mother rushed into her room and asked what's wrong. I could hear what she said, considering my room was right next to hers. She said, "There was a man in my room saying mean things." My sister was terrified at what happened. To this day, she had not told us what it said. My mom comforted her and told her to tell it to go away if it comes back. These creepy experiences of hers didn't stop there. After this night, my sister moved the doll into another room because of her experience the night before. It was another night, and therefore we had to go to bed once again. I woke once again to my sister yelling out for my mother. My mother came rushing into her room, and so did I. We asked what was wrong. She said, The creepy man came back. My mother comforted my sister. My sister then noticed the doll had returned to her room and was lying on the floor. So being the supernatural TV show trash that we were, my mother put salt in my sister's room, which was probably a bad idea. In the daytime, we packed the doll away and never touched it for a month after that. Until 1 month later, my brother said he saw a little girl in his room that night and asked if it was one of us. But it wasn't. My brother was cleaning his room when he found the doll under his bed. We all freaked out because of my sister's experience with the doll. Again, being the supernatural trash that we were, we burnt the doll. 1 month later, we found her foot in our cabinet drawer, which was super freaky because we burnt it. We threw the foot in the trash hoping that that would be the last of it. A year after we moved into our current house, we had been in the house for 2 years, when one day suddenly, we were sorting out our junk when we found the shoe and a lock of blonde hair from that same doll. Again, we burnt it. We haven't found any more from the doll since. No, this wasn't fiction. This was just creepy. I have more experiences, and we'll share them soon. The Porcelain Doll. This story takes place in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the same house as my last story. If you read that story, then you know the story that was across the street from mine had a lot of strange activity. First with the father, he hung himself, and then maybe 25 to 30 years later, the son murdered his own mother with a hammer and then dumps her body in the backyard well, where the body stayed for nearly a year before it was found. So I was 15 years old at the time that the murder happened across the street from us. So as months passed, the house was boarded up and condemned. There was something very spooky looking about this house, and when my friends and I would walk by it at night, we would all stop and stare at the windows, because we could swear we can see lights in the top window. Almost like dim candlelight. So one summer night, my friends and I decided we were going to see if we could sneak into this house. There was maybe 4 of us, I think, so we go into the backyard and see cellar doors. We argued a minute about who was going in first. Then we opened the doors and walked in the pitch black house. It smelled horrible, like something rotten. We walked upstairs but could hardly see anything. I saw a porcelain doll lying on the ground and grabbed it. This place just didn't feel right. I felt as if someone knew we were there. Then all of a sudden, my friend starts screaming and runs to get out of the house. So then we all panicked and ran out screaming. She told us she thought she heard a woman moaning and felt something grab her. As we were leaving, I stopped and pulled a small chip of wood off the house, and we went back to my house. We all went down to my garage and tried to perform a seance with the items I collected from the house. I know that was stupid, but we were dumb kids trying to have fun. We tried to make contact with the spirits that lived in that house. I don't remember if anything out of the ordinary happened that night. We might not have really paid enough attention. Before we left the garage, I hid the doll and wood chip in a corner of the garage and covered it up so my grandmother would not find it. So a few days passed, and my sister and I decided to go check out the doll. We went down into the garage and saw that all my late grandfather's toolboxes and tackle boxes had been moved and were all wide open. And the doll was sitting in the middle of the floor. That was not where I'd put her. Me and my sister grabbed each other and said, "Oh my God." I then kicked the doll and it flew towards the back of the garage. I closed all my grandpa's toolboxes and we darted out of there. It took us about a week or so to get enough courage to go back down there again and check it out. We opened the garage door and saw the exact same thing. The toolboxes were all open again and the doll in the middle of the room. This time I found an old box and put the doll in it and shoved it underneath a shelf case. My mom, sister, and I ended up moving out of my grandmother's house shortly after this incident. So about 10 years later, my grandmother passed on, and my mom comes to my house with a box and says, "I got this from your grandma's house. Do you want it?" I opened it, and it was that freaky porcelain doll. I said, "Heck no, please get that thing out of my house." I couldn't believe it. But I think about that doll and just wonder what it was doing, or what had possessed it, or manipulated it to move like that. I don't know. What do you all think? In the cabinet, and I just started feeling a weird presence there. I turned, and the doll was smiling, like a big smile, bigger than her usual one, and her eyes were pitch black. I stood and walked out of my room. I stayed out of my room for the rest of the night. The next morning, haunted dolls. Is it cursed? Is it possessed? Why does it call your name at night? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and get ready for 3 of these stories. Demon Doll. Just about a year ago, I had a glass doll. She had blonde curly hair, light brown eyes, and she wore this white dress. Usually during the night, she would look really creepy. I don't know how to explain it, but she just had this unusual look to her. I just ignored it, and didn't really care. The doll was in a tiny little white glass cabinet I had in my room. She always had this small, shy smile. A couple of weeks went by, and I had to move, so I had a lot of packing to do. One night, when I was in my bedroom packing stuff up, I had my door locked and closed. I was facing behind her about it. But after I came back from a vacation to Texas, she was even more creepy looking. And there was a weird, unusual presence near the cabinet. I also began to hear noises, and sometimes I heard my name being called at night. It creeped me out a little, but I still just ignored it.